Widowed Dad was ignored at graduation until the principal read his name out loud. They laughed at the disheveled father the moment he stumbled into the high school auditorium 20 minutes late for the graduation ceremony. His wrinkled shirt was partially untucked, his tie crooked, and his worn-out work boots left muddy prints on the polished floor. The sophisticated parents in their expensive attire exchanged glances, some covering their mouths to hide their snickers. A woman in designer clothes visibly moved her purse to prevent him from sitting next to her in the reserved front rows. Security approached him immediately, assuming he didn't belong among the proud families of Mason Heights Preparatory Academy's graduating class. "Sir, these seats are reserved for graduates' families," the security guard said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The father fumbled in his pocket for the invitation card, dropping his car keys in the process. As he bent down to retrieve them, more laughter rippled through the crowd. The ceremony had momentarily paused, all eyes now on this disruption, including those of the graduates seated on stage. One girl in particular, with honors cords draped around her neck, looked mortified, her eyes downcast as she recognized her father causing the commotion. Would you have stood up for him or joined the crowd looking away? Tell us in the comments. The security guard examined the crumpled invitation with suspicion, as though it might be counterfeit. "Mr. Reynolds? 8th row, far side," he finally said, pointing to a section where all the seats were already taken. What the guard and laughing parents didn't know was that Daniel Reynolds had just completed a 16-hour overnight shift at the hospital. But no one in that room was ready for what would happen when the principal called the graduates' names. Daniel squeezed through to his assigned row, murmuring apologies as annoyed parents were forced to stand to let him pass. He finally found an empty seat at the far end, next to a column that partially blocked his view. He didn't care. He was here for one reason only, to see his daughter Emma walk across that stage and accept her diploma. It had been their shared dream, one they'd clung to through unimaginable hardship. If stories of fathers who sacrifice everything for their children move you, subscribe now. More powerful stories every week. 4 years earlier, Daniel's life had been completely different. He and his wife Sarah had been successful professionals. She an architect with her own firm, he a marketing executive for a Fortune 500 company. They lived in a spacious home in the affluent part of town, drove luxury cars, and took exotic vacations. Emma attended Mason Heights Prep on a partial scholarship, supplemented by their comfortable income. They were the picture of upper-middle-class success. Then came the devastating diagnosis. Sarah's headaches weren't stress-related, as they'd initially thought. Stage 4 glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor with a grim prognosis. Their world imploded overnight. Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly, and the medical bills mounted just as quickly. Their savings were depleted within months. Daniel took a leave of absence to care for his wife, eventually losing his position altogether. Their health insurance covered only a portion of the experimental treatments they desperately pursued. In less than a year, Daniel lost everything: his beloved wife, their home, their savings, and his career. At 45, he was a widower, unemployed, with a traumatized 15-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical debt. They moved to a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The only work Daniel could find was as a night shift orderly at the same hospital where Sarah had spent her final months. The pay was a fraction of his former salary, but it came with health benefits for Emma and flexible hours so he could be present for her as much as possible. Through it all, Daniel made one solemn promise. Emma would stay at Mason Heights and graduate with her class. It was Sarah's dying wish, and he would move heaven and earth to make it happen. When they could no longer afford the tuition supplement, Daniel worked additional shifts and took on a second job delivering packages during the day. He slept in short bursts, sometimes only 3 hours at a time. He sold their remaining valuables, including Sarah's engagement ring, keeping only her wedding band, which he wore on a chain around his neck. Emma had wanted to transfer to public school to ease her father's burden. "Dad, it doesn't matter where I graduate from," she'd insisted. But Daniel was adamant. Your mother and I chose that school because it would give you the best chance at a scholarship to Cornell, her alma mater. This was her dream for you, Emma. It's non-negotiable. What the other parents in that auditorium didn't see was the toll those 4 years had taken. They didn't see the man who worked 20 hours a day, who went without meals so his daughter could have the required materials for school projects, who learned to sew so he could mend Emma's uniform when they couldn't afford new ones. They didn't see him helping her with calculus homework at 3 in the morning after his shift, barely able to keep his eyes open. They just saw a shabby, inappropriate man disrupting their perfect ceremony. Emma had blossomed despite their hardships. She'd thrown herself into her studies, earning a full academic scholarship to Cornell, just as her mother had dreamed. She'd also worked part-time at the local library, contributing what she could to their household expenses while maintaining her perfect grade point average. But she'd grown distant from many of her wealthy classmates, embarrassed by their changed circumstances and unable to participate in the social activities that required money they no longer had. The ceremony continued, with the school board president giving a pretentious speech about legacy and privilege. Daniel fought to stay awake, the exhaustion of his overnight shift catching up with him. His eyelids grew heavy, his head nodding forward. A sharp elbow from the woman next to him jolted him awake. "This is a graduation, not a homeless shelter," she hissed. "Show some respect." Daniel straightened, his face burning with shame. Across the auditorium, he could see the parents of Emma's former friends, the ones who had stopped inviting her over once they moved to the apartment. The mothers who had organized elaborate Sweet 16 parties and pre-prom events without including Emma. The fathers who coached sports teams and led the parent association, who had once exchanged business cards with Daniel at school functions, but now looked through him as if he were invisible. Principal Matthews took the podium and began calling graduates forward alphabetically. Daniel pulled out his phone to make sure it was ready to record Emma's moment. The battery was low. He'd forgotten to charge it while rushing from his shift, but it would be enough. It had to be. As the R surnames approached, Daniel moved to the aisle for a better view, ignoring the irritated sighs around him. His heart swelled with pride as Emma Reynolds was announced and his beautiful daughter rose from her seat, the gold honors cords gleaming against her blue gown. She looked so much like Sarah, the same graceful walk, the same determined set of her shoulders. But as Emma approached the stage, something unexpected happened. Principal Matthews paused, looking out at the audience. "Before Emma receives her diploma, I'd like to acknowledge someone special. Would Daniel Reynolds please stand?" A confused murmur spread through the crowd. Daniel froze, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Emma had stopped midway up the steps, looking equally surprised. "Mr. Reynolds, please stand," the principal repeated, scanning the audience. Slowly, Daniel rose to his feet, acutely aware of his wrinkled clothes and the dark circles under his eyes. Would you have had the courage to stand tall in that moment, or would you have wanted to disappear? Share your thoughts in the comments below. "Many of you don't know Daniel Reynolds," Principal Matthews continued, "but you should. 4 years ago, he lost his wife to brain cancer and subsequently lost his executive position and their family home due to the financial burden of her medical care. Since then, he has worked 2 full-time jobs, night shifts at Memorial Hospital and day shifts delivering packages to keep his daughter at Mason Heights." The auditorium had gone completely silent. Daniel could feel every eye on him, but the expressions had changed from disdain to shock. Mr. Reynolds has never missed a tuition payment, despite his circumstances. He has attended every parent-teacher conference, often coming directly from his hospital shift without sleep. When we had our annual fundraiser and families were asked to contribute what they could, Mr. Reynolds donated $300, money I later learned he'd earned by selling his late wife's jewelry. Emma was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stood frozen on the steps. "Furthermore," the principal continued, "Mr. Reynolds has quietly established a small scholarship in his late wife's name, the Sarah Reynolds Memorial Fund, which will help future students with financial need. He's been contributing $10 from each paycheck for the past 3 years. Daniel had never told Emma about the scholarship. It was supposed to be a surprise for after graduation. He'd wanted to honor Sarah's memory in a way that reflected her values, and helping other students access education seemed fitting. He hadn't expected it to be announced this way. When we talk about the Mason Heights community and the values we hope to instill in our graduates, we often speak of perseverance, integrity, and sacrifice. Daniel Reynolds embodies these values more than anyone I've met in my 30 years as an educator. The woman who had moved her purse earlier was now staring at her lap, her face flushed with shame. The security guard who had questioned Daniel's invitation stood at attention, his expression solemn with respect. So before Emma Reynolds receives her diploma as valedictorian of this year's class, I ask you all to join me in recognizing her father, whose extraordinary sacrifice and dedication made this moment possible. The applause began slowly, tentatively, then built to a thunderous standing ovation. Daniel stood awkwardly, unused to being the center of attention, especially positive attention. For 4 years, he had been invisible to these people, the shabby man in the background, the embarrassing parent who couldn't afford the proper attire for school functions, who drove a 15-year-old car that sometimes broke down in the pickup line. Principal Matthews gestured for Emma to join her father. She ran down the steps and through the center aisle, throwing herself into his arms with such force that he nearly lost his balance. They clung to each other, both weeping openly now, as the applause continued around them. "Dad," Emma whispered against his shoulder, "I'm so proud to be your daughter." Those simple words broke something open inside Daniel. For years, he had worried that he was a source of embarrassment to Emma, that she resented the life of poverty his choices had forced upon her. He had done his best, but he knew it wasn't the life Sarah would have provided. To hear that his daughter was proud of him, it was worth every sleepless night, every missed meal, every moment of humiliation. When they finally separated, Daniel was surprised to find Principal Matthews standing before them, holding Emma's diploma and a second envelope. "Emma, congratulations," he said, handing her the diploma. Then he turned to Daniel. "And Mr. Reynolds, the Board of Trustees has voted unanimously to name the new financial aid office after Sarah." The Sarah Reynolds Financial Aid Center will ensure that no deserving student is ever denied a Mason Heights education due to financial constraints. He handed Daniel the envelope. "This contains the official dedication, which will take place next month. We hope you'll do us the honor of speaking at the ceremony." Daniel could barely process what was happening. The room that had minutes ago been filled with judgment and scorn was now filled with respect and admiration. The parents who had laughed at him were now approaching to shake his hand, some with tears in their eyes, others offering heartfelt apologies. One father, the head of a local bank, whom Daniel recognized from pre-cancer fundraisers, pressed a business card into his hand. "My company needs people with your kind of determination and work ethic, Mr. Reynolds. Please call me on Monday. We have several positions that would be perfect for someone with your background." As Emma returned to the stage to deliver her valedictorian address, Daniel sat down, emotionally overwhelmed. His daughter stood at the podium, composed and radiant despite her tear-streaked face. 4 years ago, she began, "My mother passed away, and my father made me a promise that I would graduate from Mason Heights. What I didn't fully understand until today was the magnitude of that promise and what it cost him to keep it." She looked directly at Daniel as she continued. "My father taught me that our circumstances don't define us. Our responses to those circumstances do. He showed me that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time life knocks you down." And he demonstrated that love isn't just an emotion. It's a daily choice to put someone else's needs above your own. The audience listened in rapt silence as Emma spoke eloquently about resilience and purpose. She concluded by addressing her classmates directly. "As we leave Mason Heights today, I challenge each of you to live with the same integrity and determination my father has shown. To find purpose not in accumulating wealth or status, but in making a difference in the lives of others. Because at the end of the day, that's the only legacy that truly matters. The second standing ovation of the day erupted as Emma finished her speech. Daniel stood with the rest, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. In that moment, all the hardship of the past 4 years, the exhaustion, the humiliation, the constant struggle seemed worth it. Sarah would have been so proud of their daughter. He touched the wedding band hanging around his neck, feeling closer to his late wife than he had in years. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs, Daniel found himself surrounded by parents who had previously avoided him. They insisted on including him and Emma in their group photos, invited them to graduation parties, offered congratulations and support. The transformation was dizzying. Emma, however, politely declined most invitations. "Thank you, but my dad and I have our own celebration planned," she told her classmates' parents. It wasn't entirely true. They had planned to get takeout from their favorite diner. But Emma seemed eager to escape the sudden, overwhelming attention. As they walked to Daniel's old car, Emma looped her arm through his. "I can't believe Principal Matthews did that," she said. "How did he know all those things about you?" Daniel smiled tiredly. "I have no idea. I never told anyone about the scholarship fund. It was supposed to be a surprise for you after graduation." "Mrs. Abernathy," Emma said suddenly. "It must have been her." "Your guidance counselor?" Emma nodded. "Remember when she asked to meet with you last month about my Cornell scholarship? She was asking a lot of questions about our situation. I thought she was just being nosy, but she must have been gathering information for Principal Matthews." They reached the car and Daniel unlocked the passenger door for Emma, still treating her like his little girl, despite the grown woman she'd become. "Dad," Emma said as he walked around to the driver's side, "I need to tell you something." Daniel slid into his seat, noting the concerned expression on his daughter's face. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I've decided to defer Cornell for a year." "What? Why would you do that? It's everything we've worked for, everything your mother wanted for you." Emma reached for his hand. "I've applied for a job at the hospital where you work. They have a program for pre-med students to gain clinical experience before college. It pays well, and I can live at home and help with expenses. After a year, we'll be in a better financial position, and I can start at Cornell with less stress." "Absolutely not," Daniel said firmly. "You're not putting your life on hold for me. Your mother and I always wanted you to go straight to college, to have the experiences we had." "Dad, this is my decision. Mom wanted me to go to Cornell, yes, but she wouldn't want it to come at the expense of your health. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 4 years. It's my turn to help now." "Emma, listen to me. I made a promise to your mother, and that included seeing you off to college this fall. I won't let you sacrifice your future." "It's not a sacrifice, Dad. It's a choice, just like all the choices you've made for me. And it's only a year." She squeezed his hand. "Please respect my decision." "I need to do this, for both of us." Daniel stared at his daughter, seeing the same determination that had defined Sarah. He recognized that Emma wasn't asking for permission. She was informing him of a decision already made. She had her mother's strength and his stubbornness, a formidable combination. "We'll discuss this further," he said finally, starting the car. "This isn't settled." Emma smiled, knowing she'd won. "Whatever you say, Dad." As they drove away from Mason Heights Preparatory Academy for the last time, Daniel felt a strange mixture of emotions: pride in his daughter's accomplishments, gratitude for the unexpected recognition, and uncertainty about the future. The principal's acknowledgement had opened doors he'd thought permanently closed, but Emma's decision presented a new challenge. What neither of them knew was that Principal Matthews had made one more phone call that morning, to the Dean of Admissions at Cornell University, a former classmate. He had explained the Reynolds family situation in detail, emphasizing Emma's exceptional academic record despite her circumstances. The conversation had led to an unprecedented offer that would arrive by mail the following week, a revised financial aid package that would cover not only Emma's tuition, but also her room and board, along with a stipend for living expenses. The package would include a personal note from the dean. Miss Reynolds, your father's dedication to your education exemplifies the values we seek to foster at Cornell. We would be honored to welcome you this fall without the financial burden that has concerned you. Sometimes extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. We look forward to seeing you in August. But for now, father and daughter drove home in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of the day's events and the uncertain future ahead. The humiliation of Daniel's entrance had been transformed into a moment of triumph and vindication. The invisible man had been seen. Truly seen, perhaps for the first time in 4 years. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions or fairy tale endings. Daniel still had medical debt. They still lived in a small apartment. The challenges weren't magically erased by one moment of public recognition, but something fundamental had shifted. A burden of shame had been lifted, a father's sacrifice acknowledged, a daughter's pride openly declared. As they approached their apartment building, Emma broke the silence. "Dad, thank you for everything." Daniel glanced at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had emerged from tragedy with grace and determination. "You don't ever have to thank me, Emma. Everything I've done has been because I love you." "I know," she replied softly, "but I wanted to say it anyway." In that simple exchange lay the truth that the laughing parents at graduation had missed. True dignity isn't found in appearances or possessions, but in the quiet determination to keep promises, to sacrifice for those we love, to persevere when giving up would be easier. Daniel Reynolds may have entered that auditorium as an object of ridicule, but he left as an embodiment of the values the school claimed to represent. Never judge a person until you've walked in their shoes. The shabby man in worn work boots might just be the strongest person in the room. If this story moved you, subscribe now for more powerful stories every week. And click on the video on the screen to watch the next one, with a twist so powerful you'll never forget it.